There is a family in Lagos whose name does not appear in the textbooks your children read. Their wealth does not register in the databases that Western financial institutions use to rank the richest people on earth. Their history has not been adapted into a Netflix series, has not been the subject of a Harvard Business School case study, and has not been celebrated at Davos. And yet, for 400 consecutive years, this single family from the lagoon city of Lagos has moved more money, financed more kingdoms, and commanded more gold than most sovereign nations on the African continent have ever held in their combined histories. One Lagos family holds more gold than South Africa's entire national reserve, and nobody is talking about it. You have never heard of the Alekijo merchant dynasty. But for 400 years, the right people have. In 1624, a single Lagos trader financed 3 separate West African kingdoms simultaneously. Not borrowed money. His money. That is where this story begins. For centuries of compound growth. For centuries of deliberate, disciplined, generational wealth transfer. And for centuries of calculated silence. This is not mythology. This is not legend dressed up as history. This is economic truth that has been buried under centuries of colonial revision, institutional erasure, and deliberate miseducation. Today, we unbury it. To understand the Alekijo dynasty, you must first understand the world they were born into. The Lagos of the early 17th century was not the chaotic, overcrowded megacity of 21st century imagination. It was Iko, a precision-engineered island settlement situated at the intersection of the most powerful trade corridors in sub-Saharan West Africa. The lagoon was not a boundary. It was a highway. Canoes moved like arteries, carrying cola nuts, iron ore, textiles, salt, and gold between the interior kingdoms of the Yoruba hinterland and the coastal trading post that connected to the wider Atlantic world. The Bini Kingdom to the east, the Ijibu Confederacy to the north, and the emerging Dahomey power to the west all converged in this single geographic choke point. Whoever controlled Iko controlled the flow of everything. The patriarch who anchors our story is Adewale Olewo, born approximately 1588 on the island of Ido, the smaller landmass adjacent to what would become Central Lagos. His father, Ogondimo Olewo, was a mid-tier broker who facilitated exchanges between Ijibu cloth merchants and Portuguese maritime traders who had been anchoring ships along the Bight of Benin since the late 1400s. Adewale did not inherit a fortune. He inherited something more valuable, a precise, almost surgical understanding of how value moved between worlds that did not trust each other. He understood that the Portuguese wanted gold and pepper and that the inland Yoruba kingdoms wanted iron tools and cowrie shells, and he understood that the difference between what each party thought something was worth and what it was actually worth in the other's economy was a gap that a brilliant, patient man could live inside forever. By 1610, at approximately 22 years of age, Adewale Olewo had accumulated enough capital through brokerage commissions and currency arbitrage to make his first major independent investment. He financed a salt mining operation in the Benue Valley at a principal stake of £450 of gold-weighted cowrie currency, the equivalent, by contemporary Portuguese merchant records, of approximately 12,000 Portuguese reais. This was not a small transaction. This was a declaration. The turning point that defines the entire dynasty came in 1624, the year that defines the opening of our story. The Oyo Empire, then at the height of its military expansion under Alefin Odorawu, required emergency financing to resupply its cavalry after a devastating campaign against the Nupe Kingdom had depleted its war treasury. The Oyo cavalry was the most feared military force in West Africa, an estimated 14,000 mounted soldiers who had turned the savannah into an empire. But horses died. Weapons needed replacing. Soldiers needed paying. The Alefin sent emissaries south. At the same time, the smaller Ijibu kingdom was engaged in a commercial war against Benin over control of the inland trade routes, and its Ojoli, the paramount ruler, needed liquid capital to build fortified trading posts along the Ogun River. And simultaneously, a third power, the Egba Confederacy, was mid-construction of what historians now identify as one of the earliest planned urban settlements in Yoruba history, the proto-city of Ibadan's predecessor settlements, and needed financing for materials and labor coordination. Adewale Olawo financed all three simultaneously, not sequentially, not partially. He provided capital backing to three sovereign powers at the same moment, each unaware of his arrangement with the others, each paying him negotiated interest in the form of exclusive trade access, territorial passage rights, and commodity percentages. The gold he deployed in 1624 across those three transactions totaled the equivalent of what Portuguese East India Company records from the same year valued at approximately 48,000 cruzados. This was a man operating at a level of financial sophistication that European banking houses of the same era were only beginning to theorize. The evidence for the Alekijo-Olawo dynasty scale of operation does not come from a single archive. It comes from the convergence of multiple documentary traditions that, when read together, paint a picture of staggering economic power. Portuguese maritime records from the Corsa de Gain, the royal trading house that managed Portugal's West African commerce, reference a Lagos-based merchant intermediary they called Ovelho Duaro, the Old Man of Gold, in dispatches dated 1631 and 1638. Dutch West India Company ledgers from Fort Nassau on the Gold Coast, which is modern-day Ghana, record payments to a Yoruba merchant house they identify as the Lagos Brokers, in trade records spanning 1640 to 1688, with transaction values in those 48 years totaling over 900,000 Dutch guilders in textile and gold exchange. For context, the annual operating budget of the Dutch West India Company's entire Atlantic fleet in 1650 was approximately 1.2 million guilders. The Lagos brokers were moving nearly that volume across 5 decades from a single island settlement. British records from the Royal African Company, chartered in 1660 to monopolize English trade with West Africa, contain a 1671 memo written by a factor named Thomas Dobbin stationed in Benin that